Hey, what's up guys? Ronak here, back again with another video. So, today I'll be ranking a franchise of movies that is extremely close to my heart, the Marvel Cinematic Universe or the MCU. Now, this franchise has 23 movies called the Infinity Saga that has been spread out over a time period of 11 years and 3 phases of movies. This started all the way back in 2008, 11 years ago, with the first Iron Man movie, and the Infinity Saga concluded with Spider-Man Far From Home back in July 2019. So today I'll be giving you my thoughts on all the movies in short, and also ranking them from my favorite to my least favorite. So let's get started. So coming in last place is The Incredible Hulk. This movie was released all the way back in 2008 and was the second ever movie to be released inside of the MCU. This film had Edward Norton playing Bruce Banner and the Hulk, and I thought that he did a good job as the character. He played the role very well, but the only problem with this movie was the tone and the plot. The plot just seemed all over the place. The director did not seem to have a clear vision of what he was going for. The tone just is inconsistent with the rest of the MCU. The MCU we know today is quite light-hearted, most of the movies at least. They are quite light-hearted, funny, meant to be enjoyed. This movie just felt very different. It doesn't feel a part of the MCU that we know and love. One thing that I absolutely love about this movie though is the final fight. Hulk and Abomination just going at it, throwing cars at each other, wrecking stuff. It's just so cool to watch. I love that scene. I've watched it quite a lot, honestly. So coming in at number 22 is Thor: The Dark World. Now, this movie was a huge letdown for me, because when I heard that they were bringing in Christopher Eccleston to play the villain Malekith, I was just absolutely hyped. I'm like, oh my gosh, Christopher Eccleston, a world-class actor, coming to be in a Marvel movie. This movie's just gotta be amazing. When they actually released it though, and I went to watch it, I was just completely disappointed. Malekith was just a very poorly written character, given no character development whatsoever. His motives weren't really clear to me, and also he was just written to be, again, very forgettable. One thing that I like about this movie actually is that Frigga dies, so that gives Thor an additional layer to him. It helped in the character development of Thor. The dynamics between Thor and Loki were pretty great, and also it helps establish the reality stone or the ether for future movies like Infinity War and Endgame. So yeah, that's what gives it the edge over the Incredible Hulk. Let's move on. Coming in at number 21 is the original Thor, which released back in 2011. Now, I do not have a lot of issues with this movie. In fact, some of the things it did really great are: number 1, introducing us to the cosmic realm with Asgard. Number 2, the relationship between Thor and Loki I thought was really well handled. And number 3, the character development that Thor himself received. He starts off as this egotistical, ungrateful kid, and by the end he's much more mature than he was at the start. He has this sense of responsibility, which I just loved. It was just very well directed by the director. Just props to him for that. The thing that actually holds it back at number 21 rather than moving it higher up the ranks is the plot. I did not find the plot to be too intriguing. It felt pretty generic to me, to be honest. Okay, so coming in at number 20 is, unfortunately, Iron Man 2. It breaks my heart to put this movie so low, since it's the first MCU movie I ever watched way back in 2010 when I was only 8 years old. Younger me was just amazed at what I had just seen. I was like, oh my gosh, that is the coolest thing ever. Iron Man is flying around, exploding other robots and fighting Whiplash with War Machine. Legit, it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen. I was so excited when I watched that movie. It's the movie that actually got me very interested in the superhero genre and got me to start reading comics as well. Yeah, so moving on to the movie's negatives. Uh, it tried to squeeze way too many plot points into one short movie. What it was trying to do was set up the phase 1 finale, which is the Avengers. The thing it did great was, again, Robert Downey Jr.'s acting and Tony Stark's character development. Tony Stark is just, in my opinion, the best character the MCU has to offer. The way he's written from Iron Man 1 till Avengers Endgame is just very beautiful. He's my personal favorite. At number 19, we have Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, released in 2017. Now, this movie suffers the same thing that Iron Man 2 did, which is squeezing way too many plot points into one movie. I did not like the fact that they introduced the Sovereign and Adam Warlock in this movie, even though Adam Warlock wasn't technically introduced, he was just mentioned, but still, I feel it was not necessary. I felt that they could have kept Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 all about Guardians versus the Sovereign with Adam Warlock being thrown into the mix. That would have been really cool to see, but they introduced it in Volume 2, which I'm not a big fan of. The second thing that I do not like about this movie is the villain Ego. Now, he is a very complex character. I'll admit I did not understand it much. The first time I watched the movie, it actually took a rewatch for me to understand what his powers were, what he was actually trying to do. So let's move on to some of the good points. The good points was the story. The story was just absolutely well written on paper. The execution could have been better, but yeah. It is what it is. The second thing that I loved is the character arc that Yondu was given. Just absolutely beautiful. His funeral scene was so good with all the Ravagers. So at number 18, we have Captain America, the First Avenger. Now, I do not really have a lot to say about this movie, but one of the things it did really great is give Steve Rogers his origin story, and also introducing Bucky Barnes. In my opinion, Bucky Barnes was at his prime. The best Bucky we've ever seen was in Captain America, the First Avenger. Don't get me wrong, he is amazing in all the other movies. Sebastian Stan is just absolutely phenomenal. But the best version of Bucky is pre-Winter Soldier, when he's actually in the 1940s. The thing I do not like about this movie is the pacing. It felt way too slow for me. I get really bored while watching this movie, and it is a movie that I really want to skip every time I'm rewatching the MCU. Alright, so next up at number 17, we have Captain Marvel. Here are the things I absolutely love about this movie. Number 1 is Ben Mendelsohn as Talos. Ben Mendelsohn, as usual, was just brilliant in his portrayal of the character. He is just an outstanding actor, and this movie is no exception. Number 2 is Brie Larson's portrayal of Carol Danvers. Now, a lot of people do not like her as Captain Marvel, but in my personal opinion, she's great. She fits the role well, in my opinion. Number 3, Nick Fury's de-aging. Oh my gosh, Samuel L. Jackson, taken back to 1995. He looked so young, so well, and he was just the star of the show. And lastly, the thing I love about this movie is the Skrull twist. Most people that I know do not like this twist, as it goes completely against the comics, but in my opinion it was a pretty bold risk of them to take, and it was one that paid off. Moving on to the bad. The main bad thing about this movie is the different tones at different times in the movie and the direction. Now, as most of you all are already aware, this movie actually had two directors who had conflicting visions for the movie, which actually led to the less than average plot being written and the different tones. You can really see in different scenes that one director had one particular vision for it and the other director has another vision and another tone. So there was a lot of tonal imbalance, which led to this movie coming in at number 17. Next up at number 16, we have Iron Man 3. So this is the first movie to be released in phase 2 of the MCU back in 2013 after the events of the Avengers. I thought it did a great job of yet again giving Tony a more complex character arc with more and more layers to him. Jack Black handled everything about the character development really well. However, the thing that holds it back at number 16 is the fact that they messed up the Mandarin completely. As I said earlier, following Iron Man 2, I started reading a lot of Marvel comics, especially Iron Man and Spider-Man comics. So the fact that they messed up the Mandarin, did not stay true to the comics at all, really disappointed me. Coming in at number 15, we have Avengers Age of Ultron. Now, I think this movie is severely underrated. It gets a lot of unnecessary hate it does not deserve. So the first time I actually watched the movie, I had pretty mixed feelings about it. Some of the things I thought it did really well is the action in particular. The action was just mind-blowing. It was amazing. People on the Avengers on a floating island fighting Ultron and his other robots was just so cool to watch. They actually upped the ante in almost every aspect compared to the first Avengers movie. Much more action, many more characters. The destruction caused was like twice or thrice as much as the first Avengers movie as well. Now the thing that actually makes this movie much less enjoyable than the original Avengers is the fact that they tried to cram way too many plot points into one movie yet again. So what they were trying to do with this movie was establish future movies such as Civil War, which would lead to Infinity War and Endgame. So Age of Ultron is an important movie within the universe, but the way it was handled wasn't that great. I felt the plot got way too complex at times and was very difficult to understand. Next up at number 14, we have Doctor Strange. So I don't have a lot to say about this one, but I'd like to point out that this is in fact one of my most rewatched MCU movies and one of my favorite movies of all time. I just absolutely love to watch this movie. It's a very fun adventure that Stephen Strange goes on from the start to the end. It did a lot of things absolutely marvelously. Some of them include, number one, the special effects. I think everyone can agree with me when I say that these were absolutely breathtaking, just so beautiful to watch, and I think it is the best CGI that any MCU movie has. Number two is the storytelling. I thought Doctor Strange was given a really nice origin story. The thing that actually holds it back a bit for me is the fact that this movie felt like a typical origin story for a superhero. It did not have any distinct characteristics to it that made it stand out from other origin stories that we have seen in the past. But apart from that, it's a really solid watch, and I would recommend this movie to anyone who's not seen a superhero movie before. It's just absolutely splendid. I'd also like to add on that Benedict Cumberbatch was just absolutely amazing in his portrayal of Stephen Strange. I think he acted really well. The way he captured Doctor Strange's arrogance, ego, just absolutely was amazing. At number 13, we have one of the MCU's most important movies, Black Panther. So this movie was directed by Ryan Coogler, and in my opinion is one of the MCU's most richest storylines ever. It was written really well and it tackles a lot of real world issues in a really great manner. The movie was very political in my opinion, but it was handled in a way that makes you interested and never bored. Regarding the Oscar nomination it received for Best Picture, I think it thoroughly deserves that because it was just an amazing movie all around. Another point I'd like to add on here is Eric Killmonger. Michael B. Jordan gave a splendid performance. It was just so cool to see Killmonger battling T'Challa for the throne. It really gave an amazing vibe. So for the next two movies on my list, I'll be talking about them together. Coming in at number 12, we have Ant-Man and the Wasp, which released in 2018 following Avengers Infinity War. And at number 11, we have the original Ant-Man, which released after Avengers Age of Ultron back in 2015. Now, in my opinion, both of these movies are just very well written and directed by Peyton Reed. Both of them provide a breath of fresh air coming out of serious movies like Infinity War and Age of Ultron. What I thought it did really well is bring down the scale of the MCU in this small ant-sized world. It just takes the pressure off. It's a really fun adventure. I think the cast worked really well together. They have a lot of chemistry with one another, and their on-screen presence is just so fun. In particular, Michael Pena, his character was just so fun to watch. I absolutely just love it whenever he comes on screen and starts, blabbering stories and stuff. Now, the thing that actually makes Ant-Man 1 better than 2, in my opinion, is the storyline. The storyline of Ant-Man 1 involved this heist dynamic to it, which in my opinion is more appealing for me. The movies, both of them were just really nice, fun adventures and have one of the highest rewatchability values inside of the MCU. Speaking of our top 10 is Thor Ragnarok, directed by Taika Waititi and released in 2017. Now, this movie is the funniest movie in the MCU in my opinion, and is just a huge step up for the Thor franchise coming from Thor and Thor the Dark World. It gave Thor many more layers as a character and developed his character really brilliantly. He just embodied the God of Thunder persona that we know and love. What I think this movie did great, as I mentioned earlier, is the humor. It just lands. It's just really well done, well crafted by Taika Waititi. Korg and Meek were just really fun additions to the cast, and I loved Korg's on-screen presence. The way he interacted with Thor, his jokes, just everything about him was so cool. The fact that they brought Valkyrie in really piqued my interest in this movie, and Tessa Thompson just did a wonderful job as Valkyrie. Furthermore, they brought Mark Ruffalo's Hulk into the mix, and I think this was the most fun I've ever had watching Hulk in a movie. He just did a spectacular job playing Bruce Banner in this one. The storyline was also really great. I thought the fact that they brought Hela in was really cool. The way Hela goes down in the ending with Surtur unleashing Ragnarok upon Asgard was really great. This movie was quite emotional too. You could see Thor being broken from the inside, as his dad Odin died. He had to kill his own sister at the ending. The relationship between Thor and Loki was also given a lot more focus in this movie, which I just personally am a huge fan. At number 9, we have Spider-Man Homecoming. Now, following Civil War, this movie just provided a breath of fresh air, and it really brought down the scale of the MCU once again. It did a really great job of giving a view of the whole crazy superhero universe from the point of view of a high schooler like me. I think the storytelling was just absolutely brilliant in this one. Robert Downey Jr. and Tom Holland have great on-screen chemistry, and they look like a real dad and son pair to me. Michael Keaton's Vulture, oh my gosh, what can I say about him? Michael Keaton, world-class actor, absolutely stunning performance in this movie. I think Vulture is definitely a villain that has many layers to him and is one of the best villains in the MCU. I'd probably put him at number 2 behind Thanos, of course, in the list of best villains, because he's just absolutely phenomenal. Now, I think Tom Holland just did a really great job with the character of Peter Parker, and I think he fits the role of this quirky, awkward, nerdy high schooler. He was just handled really well, and in my opinion is the best Spider-Man out of all 3 live action ones that we've seen. Next up, we have Captain America the Winter Soldier coming in at number 8. So this movie was the first MCU movie to be directed by the Russo brothers, and I just think they did an absolutely amazing job with the movie. Now, this movie is just very different compared to the rest of the movies within the MCU, and in a completely good way. This movie is more of a political corporate thriller than it is a superhero flick, and I just absolutely love that about this one. It has this serious vibe throughout and keeps building up the tension all the way to the climax, where we get that epic fight scene on the helicarrier between Bucky and Steve. One of the things I absolutely adore within the Captain America franchise is the stunt choreography. In my opinion, the Captain America franchise has the best stunt choreography of any movie within the MCU and any movie in Hollywood in that matter. Steve Rogers' fighting style is just so unique and distinct with his shield, and I thought that it was handled just really, really well within this movie. This movie also has one of my favorite fight sequences of all time, the elevator fight sequence. That was just an amazing scene, and I keep rewatching that scene over and over again. Coming in at number 7, we have the conclusion to the Infinity Saga, Spider-Man Far From Home. So this movie takes everything that its predecessor Spider-Man Homecoming did so well and takes it up a notch. In particular, I think the action in this movie is just superb and handled really, really well. Every single fight sequence was just absolutely amazing to watch. The CGI in this movie was just very, very well done. Props to the editors and visual effects team on that one. Okay, so now let's talk about the Mysterio dream sequences. These were mesmerizing, just absolutely amazing. Being a fan of the Spider-Man comics, the moment I saw Mysterio in the trailer, I was like, okay, Mysterio is a bad guy, there's no doubt about it. Let's see how he tricks Peter. I was not disappointed at all. Oh my gosh, these dream sequences are something to die for. I just absolutely love them. Okay, so moving on from that, I think the storyline in this movie was just beautifully written by John Watts. It took Peter's character, showed how he was broken following the death of Tony in Endgame, and they built up on that really well. The comedy in this movie was just really great, way better than the first one, which had great comedy already. And that's what makes this movie rank so high on my list. Alright, so coming in at number 6 is Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 1. Oh my gosh, where do I begin? Well, for starters, I hadn't even heard about this movie up until 2 days prior to its release when I actually watched the trailer for the first time. When I watched the trailer, I was really shocked to see that they got Bradley Cooper, Zoe Saldana from Avatar, Dave Bautista, and Vin Diesel to play in a Marvel movie. At this point, I hadn't really heard of Chris Pratt before, so I wasn't really too sure about how he'd do in the movie, but as I saw, he was just absolutely amazing as Star-Lord, and I don't think anyone else could play the role better than he does. All the characters were just so good. They have such unique, distinct characteristics, so contradictory to each other, yet they fit in so well. I think James Gunn just pulled off one of the greatest feats of cinema in making Guardians of the Galaxy 1. I was so skeptical about this because the story seemed like really, really unusual to me, but it all worked out in the ending. The cast of the movie had really, really amazing chemistry together. Everyone's on-screen presence was just so much fun to watch. You just know that the movie is very well written and very well made when a sappy one-liner like "We are Groot" made a bunch of grown men cry. Lastly, I'd like to address the soundtrack of this movie. This movie has one of the best, if not the best soundtrack of any movie ever made. Everything about it just works so well, and it gives you this very 1980s kind of vibe to it, which I really dug. I found it really dope that they were able to do that in this movie. Real quick, before I move on to my top 5, go ahead, comment down below what your top 5 MCU movies are. Alright, so kicking off our top 5, we have Captain America Civil War. This movie, in my opinion, is just a very well-made movie. It is a spectacle of cinema and definitely one of the most important films inside of the MCU. Coming out of Avengers Age of Ultron, this movie felt more of an Avengers 2.5 than it did a Captain America movie. So essentially this movie shows how two different people, Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, each with their own set of values, got into a conflict with each other that led to the Avengers being split up, which led to their ultimate demise in Infinity War. Okay, so Steve Rogers, with his values of freedom and independence, obviously did not want the Avengers to become a part of the government, whereas Tony did want the government to take over the Avengers. This led to their conflict, and it led to one of the most memorable and iconic fight sequences ever, the airport fight sequence. This movie was also extremely emotional. The part where Steve reveals to Tony that he knew all along that Bucky was responsible for killing Tony's parents just really broke my heart. When Bucky and Steve actually fought Iron Man, broke his arc reactor, took off his helmet, and when Captain America was walking away and dropped his shield, as Tony said to him, "You don't deserve that. My father made that." That was just so emotional for me. I broke down in the theater. Seeing my two favorite heroes pitted against each other in a conflict just really pulled on my heartstrings and led to a movie that is unforgettable and just absolutely phenomenal. At number 4, we have the movie that started it all, Iron Man 1, released way back in 2008. Now, I never had the privilege of actually watching this movie in theaters, but since I own it on DVD, I've watched it so many times. Like, it is actually, I've lost count of how many times I've watched this movie. It's that great. I think it really benefits from not having the weight of the rest of the MCU on its shoulders. It didn't have to build towards anything. It was just a standalone movie at the time. I think they handled his character arc very, very, very well from the get-go. Robert Downey Jr. is irreplaceable. He is the one and only Iron Man. Moving into our top 3, we have The Avengers at number 3. So I still remember watching this movie opening day with my parents in Mall of the Emirates. I did not really know what the Avengers were at the time, but all I knew is that I was excited to watch the movie because it had Iron Man, Captain America and Thor all in one movie. So I remember being completely blown away by this movie. Joss Whedon did an amazing job with the storyline. It's so simple yet so elegant. The fight sequences are amazing. The chemistry between the cast is really well. This movie also gave us so many iconic moments. For example, the most iconic moment arguably of the entire MCU, the first time the Avengers assembled in that circle. Oh my gosh, that scene still gives me goosebumps to this day. I just absolutely love watching this one. It's just a great movie all around. Overall, it's just a movie where all our favorite superheroes come together to battle a common villain and just fight it out old school style. It's just so refreshing to watch this movie. I keep coming back to this one for some reason. It's just very refreshing. I love The Avengers and it is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. Our runner-up for today is Avengers Infinity War. So this is the third movie directed by the Russo brothers within the MCU, and I just have to say this movie is an absolute masterpiece. I love this movie way too much. I think it handled everything really well, from the story to the score, the action, dialogues. Everything was just perfect in this movie. I think the storyline was very, very, very well executed. This movie had a mixture of everything: action, comedy, drama, romance, and even tragedy. The ending was just absolutely unexpected. I did not expect that to happen. I mean, I had read Infinity Gauntlet and I knew that an Avengers 4 was being made, but I did not expect Thanos to snap. The score for this movie was just so beautifully composed by Alan Silvestri, and it worked so well in conjunction to the scenes in which it was played. It was just absolutely beautiful to watch. This movie is just purely Thanos' movie. Josh Brolin was the star. He just stole the show in his portrayal of Thanos. The entire movie revolves around him trying to collect the Infinity Stones, and I think it worked really, really well. Props to the Russo brothers. They did a phenomenal job with this movie. That brings us to our number 1 spot and my favorite movie of all time, Avengers Endgame. This is in fact my most rewatched movie of all time. At the time of recording this, I've seen Avengers Endgame a grand total of 11 times, out of which 4 were in the theaters. This movie is just amazing. The way the Russo brothers managed to culminate 21 other movies into this one epic finale just blows my mind. It truly is a spectacle of cinema. It is a cinematic event that will go down in history as one of the greatest of all time. Regarding the twist with Thor, where he becomes Bro Thor or Fat Depressed Thor, I wasn't really a big fan of it the first time I saw it. I'm like, okay, they just messed up Thor's character completely. But on my second and third viewings of the movie, I realized that it was the effects of depression and his own guilt that made him into this version of himself. This movie had so many emotional payoffs and heartwarming moments. It is just so incredible to me how they managed to pull this off. Some of these heartwarming moments include: number one, Captain America getting his happy ever after with Peggy Carter. I just thought it was so great to watch him finally relax and live out the rest of his days with the love of his life, Peggy. Number two, where Tony gets to meet his dad Howard one last time, where they talk about their kids. That's right before Howard was about to have Tony. Tony talks about Morgan. It's just so great. And that leads me to my third point, Morgan Stark. I mean, Tony having a daughter, caring about her so deeply was just so heartwarming and wholesome. Honestly, this movie is just brilliant. It's amazing. The movie had this insane amount of hype surrounding it, and I was very afraid that it wouldn't be able to live up to Infinity War and live up to the hype that everyone was creating for it. But boy, was I wrong. The moment I walked out of the theater after watching Endgame for the first time, I was shook. I could not say anything. I was so amazed at what the Russos managed to do with this movie. It just absolutely blew me out of the water, man. Just a overall amazing movie right there. I don't know how they do it, but this movie managed to make me cry on 5 separate occasions. Number one, Natasha dying. That was just really, really sad. I mean, Natasha was a great character, and watching her sacrifice herself, watching the pain in Clint Barton's eyes as he had to let her go, was just really, really heartbreaking. Number two, when Tony died. Oh my gosh, okay, this is a moment that actually made me sob uncontrollably. Where Pepper comes over, hugs him, and like, you can rest now. I was just in tears. I was crying out loud there. I didn't even care about the people around me. I was absolutely broken. Number three, when everyone comes back from Doctor Strange's portals. Watching everyone come back was just so hype. Like, I had goosebumps all over me. I was getting so emotional. Number four, when Captain America finally said the iconic line, "Avengers Assemble." Like, me being a comic nerd, a comic geek, watching every one of my favorite heroes come together on screen, uniting to fight one guy, Thanos, and his army, was so amazing. The moment they said "Avengers Assemble," tears started rolling out of my eye. That moment just got to me, man. And lastly, the fifth moment that made me cry was Tony's funeral. Oh my gosh, this scene was probably more emotional than watching Tony actually snap and die. The fact that every single character introduced ever in the MCU came to his funeral, had that much level of respect for Tony, amazed me. Like, that the music being played in the background was so elegant, beautiful. It was just really created that funeral vibe to it, and just made me cry yet again. I don't know if any other movie's ever gonna make me cry in the future, but Endgame, you are very special. Also, I'd just like to add my experience of watching it for the first time. So the UAE actually got it 2 days before the international release. We got it on a Wednesday. So I did not go to school that day. Wednesday morning, me and my 2 close friends went to watch Endgame. First day, first show in a huge screen. I think it was at around 9:30 a.m. in the morning. just an absolutely amazing experience. The theater seats around 250 people, if I'm not mistaken, and more than half the seats were full on a weekday morning. People bunked work, school to just watch this movie. It really shows how Marvel has created a culture, a great fan following around the world. Coming to watching the movie itself, oh my gosh, in almost every moment of the final battle, our theater exploded with excitement. The scene where Captain America finally wielded Mjolnir was just absolutely electrifying. Overall, Avengers Endgame is just a movie that manages to culminate 21 other movies into one epic, final, satisfying conclusion. The Russo brothers, major props to you guys. I don't think anyone could have directed this movie better than you guys did. You guys honestly deserve an award for that kind of direction. Yeah, that's about it. And that brings us to the end of today's video. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching this hella long video. I really appreciate you guys showing all the love on my last video, the Joker review. If you haven't seen that already, I'll be sure to link it down in the description below, and I would really appreciate it if you would go watch that video for me. I would just like to say a huge thank you to all of you who have supported me and encouraged me to start up my YouTube channel. To all my friends, I love you guys. You guys are the reason that I'm doing this, and I really appreciate you guys for being in my life. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, comment down below how you thought the video was, and I would really appreciate it if you would share it with your friends and ask them to subscribe too. Thank you guys so much, and until next time, peace out.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me, even if it's fake.